Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and today on the program, we've got more interviews coming from Slamdance Film Festival. First, we've got Lawrence Chen and Jonathan Shu, the director and producer of Starring Jerry as himself. And then later, I'll be speaking with the director of With Peter Bradley, Alex Rappoport. And joining me now via Zoom, we got the filmmaking team behind the feature Starring Jerry as himself, writer-director Lawrence Chen and producer Jonathan Shu. Welcome, guys.
Hi, guys. How's it going? This is Law. Jason, thanks so much for having us.
So I want to talk about this movie. It's very unusual. Give us a little bit about the film, give us some background, and kind of tell us how it came to be.
John and I have been working together for almost a decade in New York. And about a year and a half ago, I get a call from him, and he's frantic. And he said that something crazy had just happened. And I don't get that phone call from him very often. Usually it's like a production thing where it's like, we lost our location or whatever. But he's like, something insane has just happened. So I'm like, what is going on?
So I said, my dad, Jerry, in the title of the film, he recently retired. Just an immigrant guy living in Florida. And I told Lawrence he was recruited by the Chinese police to be an undercover secret agent.
And I was like, I'm sorry, what did you say? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Neither could John. So John asked me, let's fly down to Florida to figure out exactly what happened. This is like a kind of fantastical, incredible story. Jerry told us this story that was basically stranger than fiction. He was an agent in an international money laundering investigation taking place on U.S. soil. He told us he went to his local bank to do like secret surveillance on the bank. He wore a wire to collect evidence from his local bank teller. And the entire time, he kind of kept this secret from his family. And the story just gets crazier from there on, but we're going to leave a few things unsaid. You'll have to watch the film to find out. But after hearing this, we decided that we have to document this. We have to turn this into a film.
Like I said, it's very interesting because instead of doing some kind of a reenactment where you have somebody play Jerry, he's playing himself. And what was that decision like? Were you like, hey, Dad, you got to do this for us? Like, how did you convince him to do that?
We asked my dad if he remembered everything that happened to him. And in our conversation, we were asking him, do you remember what you were told by the police, the bank tellers, and the agency? And he said yes. And then he wrote down everything for us. He was super excited, that we could make possibly a movie out of this experience,
which I thought was kind of interesting because Jerry's kind of your average Asian dad. He's an engineer, he's a smart guy, but his interest in film, I feel is not very high. And John's been doing this for many years, and I feel Jerry's never asked you or been that engaged about kind of your filmmaking. And
he always encouraged it, but yeah,
of course he was encouraging, but here there was something different. During our interviews with him, he just got very excited about the prospect of turning this story into a movie. So John and I were kind of what is this format? Jerry's kind of very in on this. What is this film? Is it a scripted feature? I don't think that people would believe what would happen if we wrote this as a scripted narrative. So it has to be a documentary. And if it's a documentary, everything has happened already. How do you go and make this documentary if everything has happened already? We'd have to make recreations. And there's only a handful of actors, even in Hollywood, that could play an old Asian guy that people would recognize. So we've always wanted to make kind of interesting filmmaking choices. So we were like, Jerry, how would you like to play yourself in this movie? And then Jerry was like, yes, only if I get to star in a spy film, because I felt like Jason Bourne, I felt like James Bond through the entire process. So John and I were like, let's just go make a documentary that kind of feels like a spy film, but ultimately it's a film about an immigrant searching for the American dream.
We started with it as purely documentary, like information taking, fact finding, research kind of shoot. As we revealed like all these clandestine characters that he had been in touch with for weeks without anyone in my family knowing that he was involved with this secret agent stuff, we asked like, how do we build in these characters to a film? And so we started thinking, well, we should recreate these and cast those people, but still keep it from the point of view of Jerry, who did say like he wanted to play himself. So then it became from documentary fact finding into a kind of a narrative piece. And like Lawrence said, like he wrote down in script form like the sort of transactions that happened between him and these people. And so it became a hybrid approach just from
we didn't
the process.
We didn't really do it with genre in mind, or like for the purpose of it being a selling point. It sort of became the nature of how we wanted to tell the story. I think that this story was so fantastical. The fact that we had to recreate things to be able to tell it in the first place, and the fact that we just wanted to cast Jerry himself, turned it into this really nebulous, abstract, hybrid docufiction thing. And it ended up kind of falling into a little bit of like a crime genre category because Jerry is this undercover secret agent. And so none of these were necessarily intentional, other than the fact that Jonathan and I wanted to sort of make the most creative choice possible and one that would best serve the story. So we kind of embarked on this, you know what? I don't think anybody's going to understand this, but let's just do it. And let's just catch them off guard as we're doing it. Because when you open the film, it just feels like a regular documentary about a regular guy, and then it just becomes something else. And that was all kind of not really planned out. But that's just how
it wasn't. Yeah.
When did this whole thing with Jerry take place? Like what year, circa?
Middle of 2021, this happened.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And literally, Jerry had just retired, and he's just finished his job, and the police call being like, "We need you as a secret agent," and he jumped on the opportunity, not knowing where it would go. And Jonathan, his fully grown adult son with kids of his own, finds this out about his father basically a year and a half ago. So this is a very recent thing. It was not a 30 years ago, and we're kind of recreating. It was very fresh for everybody involved.
At this point, I don't know if you guys have locked distribution or anything like that, but you're going to Slamdance, which is awesome. Congrats on that. But what's the plans for the film? Do you see a theatrical run? Do you guys see it on streaming? What are your hopes for the film coming up?
This is our first rodeo. This is our first feature, and we've been so kind of practiced in the making of films. And now, as a lot of first-time filmmakers will probably tell you, it's like, what do we do now? We've made this thing and kind of we're going on this festival run. So we don't really have that many kind of like hard set expectations. We'd love to see it on streaming. I just hope that, like you mentioned earlier, the challenge is like, how do you convince buyers and distributors to understand what kind of film this is? We're just hoping that this is a story about like an everyday immigrant dad, and it's an emotional family story about the American dream, and takes you for a turn a couple times. And hoping that somebody and a distributor will see that there's a bit of magic here with John and his family and Jerry. And hopefully this thing will end up on streaming at some point. I think that's what we would like to see for it.
For people who want to know more about you guys and more about the film, where can they find you guys online?
You can find us, we had a website for the film, so it's starringjerry.com. And then you can find either of us on Instagram as well. So you can go to at starring Jerry as himself on Instagram, or at the Law Chen on Instagram.
Mine's is at Shoebox Productions, at HSUBOX Productions. And yeah, we'll be posting stories, throughout our filmmaking journey and the festival run. So would love if you guys want to see some behind the scenes and stuff. It'd be great.
Yeah, and the funnest part is that Jerry,
yeah,
ordinary dad Jerry, is going to be able to go on this festival run as well, and kind of enjoy for the first time this whole like totally different world that he would never have expected for himself. So it's gonna be a really fun ride for him and his family.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me as part of your junket.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Joining me now via Zoom is the producer-director of With Peter Bradley, Alex Rappoport. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you. Thanks for making us part of your junket. I saw the film last night. Really enjoyed it. Lovely film. I'm curious to know more about it. Well, first of all, tell us about the film. And it's a documentary. Tell us about the film and sort of how did it come to be? Like, how did this evolve? How did this happen?
Well, the film is a feature-length documentary. It's a portrait piece of Black abstract artist Peter Bradley, who's now 82 years old. He was 79 when I met him exactly 3 years ago. It was just after New Year's of 2020 when I was introduced to Peter by a local art gallerist here in Saugerties, where Peter and I both live in Saugerties. Robert Langdon introduced me to Peter, told me a little bit about Peter's story, and that he was living just like 5 minutes away from me. So I went and met Peter, asked him if he was into being filmed, and he was super excited. And so I just started going over with my camera, when I had free time. And I did the whole thing myself. I'm a cinematographer and editor. So it was just a personal project, a passion project, as they say. And I didn't have anything in mind when I started filming Peter, except I just knew he was a great subject, not only visually with his artwork, but his life story is really remarkable. And the fact that he had, at the time I met him, had been essentially forgotten, it seems, by the art world for decades, made it even more intriguing. In fact, I came to learn subsequently from people that knew about Peter that he had this mysterious sort of recluse, I don't know what you would say, rumors about him. No one knew what happened to him, but he'd just been living quietly in Saugerties here for the last 25 years.
It's an interesting story. I mean, just doing a subject of an artist, you're in art film territory and people might be a little bit put off by that. When you say a Black abstract painter, what is there, like 6 of them? There's not that many that you could name historically. And when you say abstract, most people think people like Jackson Pollock or Koenig or, these other names. When you were getting into this, was there like a goal of, I'm going to bring this guy to the fore again, or I'm going to, we're going to try and get his message out there? Was it a bit of propaganda?
Well, I don't know if you could say that because I didn't have any investment in Peter per se, but once I got to know him and appreciated his remarkable backstory, up until the age of about 35, Peter seemed like he was on trajectory to become, an A-list or kind of household name modern artist, before he kind of fell off that track, so to speak. I was concerned. I did feel like since I was the only one seemingly interested in Peter, I did feel a little bit of pressure upon myself just to try and get the film done as soon as I could, so that people would know who Peter is. He was, I'll just say he was financially insecure, at the time that I met him. And that concerned me. And so getting to be friends with him over the course of making the film, which was just this very intimate one-on-one experience. There was no one else involved. It was just me and him the whole time. So, we got to be fairly close, and I worried about him. In terms of Black abstract artists, I mean, you're right. We don't tend to know about many, and that's tied up with sort of thorny issues of race in the arts. There were some contemporaries of Peter's, but they were not given big galleries and museum shows typically back in the day when they were alive. When Black art per se got to be more in vogue by the 80s, they were, the market was for more figurative and political stuff that on the surface of it, people could look at and go, oh, that's Black art. And I'm certainly no expert on this. So, an abstract painting doesn't tell you anything about the painter. So it wasn't, no one was really that interested in it until quite recently. But Peter was part of what they called the color field school of painting, which was considered the third wave of abstract expressionism started by Pollock, after World War II. And it also fell out of, by the early 80s, color field painting sort of fell out of favor, which also has to do with, why his career kind of went downhill.
Did you guys do a lot of pre-interviewing beforehand, or you just kind of go over there, slap a mic on them, and shoot?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I went over and slapped the mic on him, and it's a lot of interviews. I think I sat Peter down something like 20 times. And each time I would sit him down, there were different things I was interested to know about. And he was very, forthcoming. There was nothing he wouldn't talk about. And that was fantastic. I mean, you're right. I mean, at a certain age, I think you feel like you don't have anything to lose by talking about stuff. In terms of how the film is so hermetic with just Peter, and the story world never leaves his property, his house and studio just outside of town here. Initially, I would have liked to have taken a more conventional route, interviewed art experts, etc. But COVID hit just after I started filming Peter. And so it wasn't even possible. And as I continued with Peter, we took a break during the initial shutdown. At that point, I had something like 15 hours of stuff, saved my mental health in that first 6 weeks of COVID. I just came in here, and this is where I edited the film. All the gear I shot it with is behind me. And I just watched Peter, and I kind of wrapped my head around what was great about it was that it was just him, And so I realized that's just sort of the DNA of the film. That's just what it needed to be.
Well, you do use some archival footage and some pictures and stuff, so that opens up a bit, and it does give you context, but it's all context from his point of view. Were you at any point making the film like that, were you worried that maybe the scope was a little too narrow, or that you didn't have enough context, or like how, because you want his point of view, but you also want the film to be balanced. How were you able to kind of do that in editing? I'm sure it didn't come right away.
Well, I mean, in terms of balance, there is no balance. It's just one guy talking about his life in his own words. I mean, I'm not trying to come off as the definitive biographer. I'm not someone from the art world. I'm just a curious person. And I, yeah, I think there's other stories that could be told about Peter, certainly. I mean, he alludes to the fact that he's not liked by a lot of people. I think, like a lot of male artists in particular of his generation, there's a lot of egotism, a lot of arrogance, but he's mellowed out, obviously, at 80 years old. And, if I had met him 20 years ago, he might have told me to F off and take a hike with my camera. So I just happened to catch him at this time, a time, by the way, which was all the more magical because I, for the most part, filmed Peter over the first half of 2020. I was editing in the fall of 2020, still going over and picking up little interviews, things to fill in the blanks, when Peter was rediscovered. And so Peter is now represented by an art gallery, Karma Gallery, in New York. He's been, just in the last year and a half, his financial situation is totally flipped. He's become wealthy. He's selling art all over the world. He's selling artwork that's for 6 figures. Canvases that were literally piled up on the floor when I was filming him with nowhere to go are now very highly valued and highly desired. So I inadvertently captured the before story just before it was before. And people have asked me why I didn't follow the success trajectory at the end of the film. And the answer to that is twofold. First of all, I don't find success generally all that interesting as a subject, but also his gallery was not interested in, didn't allow me to film his initial exhibits. They were aware of the film at the point they came along and found Peter, and they had seen an early rough cut and they loved it. And basically they were like, don't ruin this great film by bringing like the commerce of art into it, because no one cares. And I agreed, it's a guy literally that was just painting for painting's sake. And that's what the film is about, and it's great that he's now successful, but that's sort of what's happened later.
I'm not sure where you guys are at in your festival run with the picture. Congrats on Slamdance. That's awesome. But have you managed to see it with an audience so far?
I did a couple of work in progress screenings, one locally and one in Houston. The response is great. I mean, and I'm encouraged because people that are not art people or interested in art history are really taken by Peter as a character, just from as a personality. And his art, abstract art is kind of very accessible. It just is what it is. You can see in it what you want to see. There's no message that you have to interpret. He's lacks completely any pretension about talking about art. So it's very inviting in that way. And just from a general 20th century American history point of view, it's interesting because Peter is sort of like a zealot and associated with a lot of very famous people in 20th century art and culture, and particularly jazz music as well, which is sort of a B story.
At this point, is there plans for distribution? What's next for the film?
Well, fingers crossed. The world premiere is at Slamdance, so I'm just focused on that. It's actually, the film is just finished just in the last week, where it's all mixed and the titles are on it. We're going to try and get as much attention for as we can in the run up and during Slamdance, and it's in it's been submitted to 6 or 8 more festivals that are coming down the line. I I just hope this is the beginning and it finds a home. The good thing is that it really didn't cost much for me to make the film. Going out and shooting it and editing virtually cost nothing. Finishing the film has been rather expensive. And by the way, I want to say that there's a fantastic original jazz score by Javon Jackson, which was performed and recorded live in a studio with his quintet. And I've been fortunate to be able to raise enough money to get the film up on a screen now. And but in terms of distribution, the payoff, I don't need a big payoff. If I get an opportunity to get it on a nice streaming service, I'll just go for it.
Where can people find out more about it? Do you guys have a website? Is there an Instagram, anything like that?
I'm working on some social media. For now, withpeterbradley.com is the place to go, and tons of info there, including about Slamdance and tickets and all that stuff.
Hey, thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, as always, the website is norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. You could find us on all your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank my guests, Lawrence Chen, Jonathan Chu, and Alex Rappoport, and of course, our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.